Hey, what's going on, guys? Nice to see you guys back in another video. In this video today, I'm going to be just talking about these weird things that I see Americans do. And it's not going to be necessarily a top 10 list. It's not going to be in any particular type of order. But I'm going to just talk about things that I feel that are quite weird about American culture. For one, the expectations that many American people have on life in general. Everyone knows the whole run the rat race, do the typical 9 to 5 job, go to college, go to school, go to college, and then graduate and get a good job afterwards. But there are also other things outside of that American culture kind of tries to encapsulate people into, and you're forced to do a lot of things. A lot of cultures can be very similar in that type of way where you're expected to live up to certain cultural expectations. But for a country that's supposedly supposed to be free, and that's the principles that we were founded on, you're not really that free. You have to do all these societal expectations. I noticed that a lot of Americans have this fear of missing out. If I don't do what someone else is doing or do something that's similar to what they're doing, then I feel like I'm missing out somehow. Here's some weird things that I feel like Americans kind of do. You feel like you have to buy a house. You feel like you have to have a certain type of lifestyle. You have to go to college. You have to have a professional type of job. And if you don't have all these things, then in American society, you're a failure, which I don't think is really that fair, especially we're starting to see that a lot of people are not able to live up to these societal expectations, especially now with the job market and how wages are not going up, and how you're not able to pay for where you're able to really live at, or pay for as much commodities as our parents or even our grandparents were able to have access to. And it's these societal expectations that end up boil up to the point where people feel like they're not really living a life for themselves, they're living a life for other people. And you have to do every single thing in a particular type of way. A thing that I find a little weird about American culture is the fact that you have the tip. The fact that these corporations are millionaires and billionaires, and how you're expecting people to pay for essentially your employees' wages. I don't think that's a fair practice. And I think that's some American BS. You don't see this in any other country that you go to, that you have to pay for extra wages. You have to pay for where you're going to a restaurant, you're already paying for the bill in the first place. So then you're having to pay for additional part of the bill. So typically you have to pay 20% of the bill for the for the tip. You have to pay 20%, and that's 1/5. That's 1/5 of what you're paying for the dinner. So let's just say the dinner was $100. You're paying an extra $20 for some extra service, when that should already be included within the service in the first place. If they wanted to charge you like that, the restaurant should have decided to charge you whatever they wanted to charge you for it. But it's these weird gray zone that a lot of Americans like to live within. It's like you should automatically know what to do in these situations. You should know what to do in every single situation. And I feel like a lot of people act like our culture, people say whatever they want to say directly, and a lot of times they do, but they do it in a very particular type of way. For example, a lot of Americans like to do small talk, like they like to engage in small talk, and they like to talk to random strangers, and they're not hesitant to really open up a conversation with a random person. But it can be difficult at times to actually have real conversations with people that you may have known for years outside of small talk conversations. Every conversation with a lot of American people are all wrapped into a weird small talk conversation about another small talk conversation. And I can't keep up with it a lot of times. I don't have a problem talking about small talk. I know a lot of people say that they hate small talk, But in my personal opinion, small talk is actually a gateway to talk about things that actually interest you. But most people in America, they'll just talk about small talk, and that's pretty much it. So, for example, at work, they may talk about, hey, yeah, so this one person, you know, they were having problem at the printing machine the other day, and I told them this story, and it wrapped into this other case. I remember when I was first starting my job, I was having the same issues as you, and then it'll maybe wrap into, oh yeah, well, so what are you doing for the weekend? How is your family It's never in detail about what you're actually doing. It's just you talk a little bit about this, you talk a little about that. It's nothing in particular that is that interesting. And yeah, a lot of Americans like to live in similar ways to each other. There's no uniqueness about really anything. You can see with the infrastructure, you can go to any American city and more and less, it is about the same as the next city. You can go halfway across the country and you can see a city that's exactly the same as a city in Georgia. That's the state I live in. And you can go to Nevada or you can go to California and you can see an exact city that looks very similar. Of course, there may be other architect styles that look slightly little differently, but we're gonna have the same restaurant chains. And most of America, they'll have the same restaurant chains. And that's also another thing. A lot of people like fast food. There's no mom and pop shops. You just have slop. You're just eating just slop. And you're paying for it too. You're paying what? Typically, you'll go to a place like Chipotle. You're going to be paying what? You're going to get the rice and beans, and you're not even paying for any extra anything. No guac. You're not getting any bacon. You're not getting queso. You're not getting extra servings. It'll be about $16 for a bowl. And that's ridiculous, especially when you're considering what it actually costs. I mean, it probably only cost him like $2, maybe even $3 with guacamole to even make that. Even with guac, that would be about $3, maybe even $4 max. But it's the exuberant cost of everything. Everything feels like it's a cost. It feels like this country also lacks a lot of third space options. Everyone wants to opt for driving everywhere. And I understand that's cool to a certain extent. We can have driving. Other countries have driving as well. But it's the fact that America has really no substance. All I see whenever I drive around, you just see green and gray. And what I mean by green and gray is a lot of times you'll see the green grass and you'll see the gray roads. A lot of times we don't even maintain our roads. Our roads, you know how often you have to replace your freaking tire? I mean, well, I have a Tesla, for example. The tire's a little bit heavier, so I have to replace my tires at twice the rate that your regular person probably has to replace their tires. But to be honest, I shouldn't have to be in a system where you have to opt for having a car, or if you don't have a car, you have no life at all. There's no way you can have any sort of enjoyment at all. And it's the added fact that you're having a car-centric culture. How much money do you think that end of the day you're having to spend on a car versus if you had efficient public transportation? So let's be fair. With public transportation in a lot of cities, you're probably going to be spending about $100, $200 per month. In the United States, I don't really exactly know what the numbers look like, but I know in cities like Tokyo and Paris, that's about what you're paying, $100, $200 per month. Okay, anyway, what you're spending per month in America for just even having a car note, your average car note is about $300 to $400. Then, depending on your age, you're having to pay a premium for insurance. And insurance in general is super expensive in America. So people have to end up paying what? Maybe your average insurance is about $300 for insurance. Me personally, I'm paying $600 for insurance. And I understand it's my age and it's this type of vehicle that I have. I have a quote unquote, they say luxury type of vehicle, which I could kind of get behind, but I mean, my dude, I'm paying $630 for my insurance, and then I'm paying another $400 for my car note. So I'm already spending $1,000 before anything else. So you really have to be making a certain amount of money in order to even live a basic type of lifestyle in this country. It feels like you have to pay for transportation, then you have to have maintenance for that car. Your average person is probably spending, ooh, probably, I would assume with maintenance, you have to get tires, um, you're putting gas in the car. You're probably spending about an extra four, let me say a range, maybe everyone doesn't drive the same amount of range. You're spending an extra $3,000 to $4,000 or $5,000 per year on having a freaking car. That's not even really worth it to me, considering what that money could be used for. I understand a lot of times people talk about, oh, the wages that you're making in America, it compensates for it. Okay, so let me take a scenario where someone is making maybe $32,000 in Europe and another person is making maybe, what's the average wage in America? Maybe $52,000 a year. Okay, the person in Europe, they live in a decently populated city. They maybe not live in the they may not live in the capital of their particular type of country, but it's okay. They live in Europe. And then the other person, because in America, essentially most of our jobs, and this is how most places work in the world, right? The person in America, they have to live in a bigger city. So because of that, they have to pay, well, let's just say, well, apples to apples, right? Let's say the person in America, they live somewhere in like Dayton, Ohio, and they're making $52,000 per year, which is about the average wage for an American person to make per year. I think it may have gone up. It may be 54,000 per year. Okay, so then after taxes, 54,000 per year. Let's just say they take out for insurance, they take out for retirement. So and then they're left with about what, 3,000 per month. And then let's just say they're spending an extra, I don't know, in my case, like an extra, or close to my case, an extra $700 per month on having a car. And then let's just say they live alone or with a roommate or whatever, they're spending $1,400 per month on that. So you're at $2,000, and then you have maybe $1,000 in savings. And then let's just say something really crazy that month happens to where they have to spend maybe $1,000 on the car. So you get what I'm saying? It's a lot different for the American scenario. And then with the European scenario, let's just say similar type of situation, but the European doesn't have a car. But they're making the average salary for Europe. They have their own apartment, which is probably about €1,000 per month. Maybe after taxes, they're left with about 1,000, but they're not paying any extra money for insurance. If anything crazy happens, like what's the most expensive thing that happens? Maybe personal costs, maybe something like that. But your average European may end up with about the same amount of money per month as an American. Because keep in mind, I also believe that Americans have more bad spending habits. They utilize credit cards, and that props up a lot of things. Because that's also in the culture as well. It promotes you to almost try to be like a celebrity or be like a celebrity light. And it keeps you in a habitual cycle to where you're working and you have hardly no work-life balance. And then you're doing all these things. You have a lot of material goods, but you're not actually living a life that is worth living, because you're really not, because you're just constantly working for the rat race. You're working to live a basic lifestyle and then live like actually below basic. This is probably the base level of where most Europeans are at, and this is the base level where most Americans are at. I'm saying quality of life, just every single aspect. Maybe not job opportunities as much, because in Europe there are a lot of bureaucracies. But I would also say that in America, it's not any better, because a lot of the jobs, especially for Gen Z, they're basically shitty type of jobs where there are not a lot of entry level positions that Gen Z can actually work. and you need to have 3 to 5 years of experience, and then you need a college degree. You need all of these type of things. So more and more, it's just becoming to the point where Americans can actually live in their own cities. It's probably just better to make an income overseas, and make an income in American dollars and living overseas is a much better outcome than living in America, because the American dream essentially is dead. And capitalism killed, like the American version of how capitalism is conducted is definitely a reason why the American dream is dead. Because everyone wants to have a big house. Everyone wants to have the same sort of thing. No one is really that unique in what they really want. I'm not going to say the idea of wanting a house is not somewhat prevalent in other countries, but at the end of the day, if you're relatively young, and I say relatively young from 20s to under 50, what is the exact utility of having a house? Because especially with how the market is orchestrated or being conducted right now, it would actually be more beneficial if you lived in an apartment, because depending on what city you're in, depending on what industries in that city, you may want to move around for every 3 to 5 years, you know what I mean? Unless you have a very stable position that is high paying, I wouldn't try to get a house and then you're just stuck with it. If you're making under $100,000, it makes no sense in getting a house, really, to be quite honest. In most cases, it makes no sense in getting a house. If you're under, let's say, 40 years old, well, if you're going to be using it as an investment property, but getting a personal type of house, or if you have kids, in certain type of scenarios, it can make sense. But yeah, but that's one. These are some of the reasons why I don't like the country, and I would also just say, yeah, the infrastructure and the general social interactions here feel so scripted. Everything feels fake. No one wants to genuinely talk to people, and that's one reason why you see the loneliness epidemic. I'm not going to say that other countries don't have a degree of the loneliness epidemic, but America is uniquely weird. America is an isolating country. It feels like almost, you can walk down the street and it feels almost completely abandoned. You can walk down hardly any like main street, main road. I understand people can say that we're more car centric, but does that mean that people don't walk at all here? It's the weirdest thing. Even in my neighborhood, a lot of times, you really don't see people walking in the suburbs. You don't see people walking in the city. So where do people go? And that's also connected with the lack of third space options. Where do you go? Do you go to a Starbucks? Do I have to sign up for an event in order to have friends, like a fraternity, like you're in college or something like that? But yeah, that's one of the reasons why dating culture is bad here, because our general culture promotes isolation, and basically you only get rewarded if you're at the top upper echelon of whatever industry or whatever sector you're in. It doesn't benefit most people. And that's why Americans are obsessed with billionaires, they're obsessed with rich people. Oh, and then there's also countercultures in America. Not everyone is necessarily obsessed with that, but a lot of people are obsessed with becoming rich. But I realized that the reason why a lot of people are obsessed with these things in this country is due to the fact that everything is so expensive, and then you have to damn near be making $1 billion in order to have a base level type of lifestyle. You have to be damn near, realistically, I feel like you have to make at least $300,000, $300,000 a year to have an okay lifestyle, to have a decent lifestyle. What do I mean? A lifestyle where you can actually travel a decent amount, a lifestyle where you don't have constant worry that like, let's just say, like job security, let's just say that health insurance, your kids' well-being, putting them in a good school. You have to be making $300,000 in America realistically to have a really good life that most people have easy access to in most parts of the developed world. Let me just say that. I'm not gonna just say most parts of the world, but I would say that to a certain extent, It is insane here how crazy expensive things have gotten. And it's sad that Americans have to think about leaving when we don't have like just access to having a good culture or just having access to cities that we can actually walk in. And I think that's a huge part why a lot of Gen Zers are lonely. But that's just my thoughts for today, guys. I'll see you guys in the next video. All right.